Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the TASC podcast, the show where we talk about the important issues and topics that face the UK's ambulance family. My name is Karl Demian, and I'm the Chief Executive at TASC, the ambulance staff charity. Today, we're focusing on the work of the Association of the Ambulance Chief Executives, known as AACE, which was established in 2011 to provide the UK's statutory ambulance services with an organisation that can support them in the implementation of nationally agreed policy. Hopefully everyone in the ambulance community will have heard of AACE, and I'm very pleased today to be joined by two of the leaders of that organisation. And in just a few short months ago, AACE appointed a new chair in the form of Wales Ambulance's CEO, Jason Killens. And Jason has joined me today, along with AACE's Managing Director, Anna Parry. We're going to talk today about AACE's role, what Jason and Anna see as the main challenges facing our ambulance services, and what AACE are currently doing to tackle them. So, good morning, Jason. Good morning, Anna.
Hello, Carl. Good to be with you, and obviously all the listeners.
Yeah, to echo Jason, really good to be with you. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, TASC.
Thank you. We're quite enjoying doing these podcasts because we're getting to talk to interesting people and an opportunity, I think, to talk, as I said earlier, about some of the important things. But before we get into some of the main topics, Jason, in your new role, what exactly does the chair of AACE do?
It's a great question. It's good to be called interesting as well, Carl. It's the first time I've been called that, so that's good. Look, I mean, as you say, I've been in this role for a couple of months now, and of course, to become the chair of the association, my peers, fellow chief executives across the UK ambulance services, take a vote as to who they want to be their chair. So my role essentially is one of, I guess, kind of coordinating and kind of leading discussions in our meetings, being a bit of the kind of face, if you like, for the association and the sector publicly. And we've already done, seen some kind of media coverage involving that, and perhaps also to offer my kind of perspective on what I think the priorities for the sector are, because one of the things that I had to do as an incoming chair or a prospective chair was to share with my chief executive colleagues across the services in the UK, what I felt were the priorities for us as a UK sector for the next 3 to 5 years, and there's 3 or 4 things which I'm sure we'll get into discussion on shortly, which I think are important for us, and so there's the ambassadorial role, the front-facing role, perhaps as a senior leader in the sector, but also using it as an opportunity to make progress on some of the things which I think are important to our people and therefore our services and our patients.
Great, thank you. And Anna, a similar question from a slightly different perspective to you. How did your role in AACE work, and how do you dovetail with Jason?
So thank you, Carl. So I've been in the managing director role at AACE for just over a year now, since October 2023, but I've been with AACE since its sort of formation as the Association of Ambulance Chief Executives in 2013. And kind of my overarching role is to ensure that me and the team do our best to kind of support Trust to achieve our strategic ambitions, which are very much around supporting our members, so all UK NHS ambulance services, to become providers, employers, and sort of partners, collaborators of choice. Delighted to have Jason in the chair role now. We were very sorry to say goodbye to Darren Mockery, who was with us for 4 years. But I think so between us, our responsibility is to ensure that we're kind of taking the team forward and doing our respective utmost to make sure that we are sort of moving in the right direction and building on the strengths of the ambulance service as we kind of move forward. And at the moment in England particularly, that's very much around the kind of 10-year plan feeding into that and the kind of government Department of Health and Social Care agenda, but kind of working as a collective and providing that voice for the UK ambulance sector.
Really interesting. And there's lots, I think, for us to talk about. But Jason, just to go back to one of the things you said when you were elected, chosen to become the chair, you said you shared what you saw as the key priorities going forward. I wonder if you could tell us what you see as your key priorities during your tenure.
Yeah, so thanks, Carl. I'll make the distinction here, obviously, that we're talking about, what I see the key priorities for me in the chair of AACE, the association, being, rather necessarily than in my role, my substantive role as chief exec in Wales. That said, they are pretty much identical, certainly at a strategic level. So for me, there are four things which I think are important for the sector, crucially important for the sector. The first one is about our workplace culture. So that's about making sure that we have compassionate, inclusive teams. All of our people are genuinely valued, particularly where we've got experiences coming through of inappropriate behaviour in our workplaces. So I think our culture journey, the work we're doing around sexual safety, around misogyny, around respecting difference, around incivility, and so on. All of these things are crucially important to us. They make for good, productive, professional workplaces. And of course, connected to that, it's important that our people feel able to speak up. So the work, the agenda, the speaking up safely agenda is also crucially important to us. That's important for our people, but it's also really important to provide safe and effective care to patients, the people that we joined our organisations to help and serve. So that's kind of number one. That's the top of my list. I think that the second one for me is around our vision and our strategy as a sector. Where are we going? What are we doing? Colleagues listening today will have heard me say, quite openly before, that I think the current model of service delivery in the ambulance sector here in the UK and indeed internationally, because it's largely the same everywhere else, is not fit for purpose anymore. We're operating a model which is largely the same as it was 50 years ago. Someone rings 999, we take some details and we send an ambulance. In most cases, that's not fit for purpose anymore. Communities use us differently. That the environment in which we're operating in is very different to that 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. Demand is different. The opportunities available to us as a sector for our people in terms of their skills and their education are very different to that which they were 30 years ago, let alone 50 years ago. So where are we going? What's our strategy? What's our offer to the health and social care system? Because it simply cannot be about transport anymore. We are long gone are the days that we're transport providers. We are providers of care in our communities for those in our communities which need our services. We're operating different services than we were 20, 30 years ago. And so our strategy and our vision is crucially important to me. Where we're going, connected to that, of course, there's how are we lobbying decision makers and key stakeholders in our local, regional and national health and social care system, and beyond that, recognising, of course, we are an emergency service, but we're also part of health. So we've got the two constituent parts, if you like, we need to manage and service. So how are we lobbying those key decision makers and opinion formers to give us access to the resources that we need to deliver on that vision and strategy we have for the future. And then I think the fourth area for me, the final part, it is recognising that AACE is a membership body, is how do we support not only services locally, but also the regional alliances. So, we've got the Southern and the Northern Alliance now in England, and what's the role of AACE in supporting colleagues who are coming together across regions in the north and the south of England, particularly, to be more efficient and effective, provide better care for patients, and ultimately improve the workplace experience for all our people. So kind of four high level things that are all interconnected, but all very relevant, I think, not only for the here and now, but also the future direction of where our sector is going.
Really, really very interesting four things. And I'm going to pick just one for now, then I'll talk to Anna, to you about how AACE will support the development of those going forward. But the one that might cause some interest is the vision and strategy, describing the current model for ambulance services, quote unquote, is not fit for purpose and remains the same as it was 50 years ago. Would you like to just expand on some of the things you're thinking about there? Because you're beginning to create a picture of a very different role for the
Yeah.
ambulance service.
So look, I mean, I'll talk here perhaps about the direction we're taking the service more locally here in Wales. But again, I've spoken about this openly in the last couple of years. So when I say it's the same as it was 30, 40, 50 years ago, I caveat that with largely the same. Because yes, we are doing different things. We've got paramedics now. We didn't have those. Registered paramedics now. We didn't have those 30 years ago. We've got advanced practitioners. We didn't have those 10 years ago. We've got paramedic prescribers. We didn't have those 5 years ago. That just gives you a sense of the kind of change journey that the organisation, the sector, is going on. But we're largely doing the same thing which we were 20, 30 years ago, which is taking people to hospital. We're doing better. We're treating those patients better in our communities. We're offering more consult and close or hear and treat or whatever your local organisation calls it. But essentially, we're providing more advice to patients remotely, closing off episodes of care safely in communities, conveying less to emergency departments, but nonetheless, largely we still convey most of the work that we see, particularly in the 999 service. But of course, as the role of the sector has broadened, we have different clinicians in our workforces now than we had 30 years ago. Degree education, master's education, paramedic prescribers, nurses in our organisations, mental health practitioners in our organisations, pharmacists in our organisations. This starts to be a very different offer than the ambulance service, the traditional quote unquote ambulance service of 30 years ago. So I see a future where we are conveying I see a future where our conveyance rate is nearly 100%. And I say that because I see a future where we only go to the work that we really, really, really do need to go to. And therefore we convey the vast majority of those patients that we respond to. But every other patient we manage safely and effectively in some other way in our communities. Now that might be that we send a paramedic prescriber who an independent practitioner who's a prescriber that can offer the patient with the the UTI or the chest infection their prescription for antibiotics in the community. It might be that we send a mental health practitioner to someone in acute crisis who's known to a mental health team in the community. It might be where we've got a patient or someone that contacts us that's got more of a social care need, that we're connected better with social care in our contact centres, and we offer a direct pathway for that patient into a crisis team in the community. Just 3 examples, Karl, but there are many, many, many more where I see a future where we only go to the patients that really, really need an emergency ambulance, and we convey the vast majority of those to EDs, to emergency departments, and the rest we deal with in some other way. Because I think gone are the days where we should be saying to ourselves, well, we've got to stop people ringing 999. That's not going to happen. The reality is we have to get smarter as a sector in how we respond to the activity that we receive, and instead of the blunt model of respond and convey, we need to get much more nuanced, targeted at the individual patient specific need, and offer a service which manages their episode of care effectively in the community in the vast majority of cases. Could talk about it for hours. Yeah.
It's really interesting, and for someone like myself who's an outsider that's come into working in this area, it's everything that you've outlined there. There are things that I didn't actually know that were, people coming into the profession, the prescribing, etc., which is interesting. But to widen it out a little, and to bring Anna in here. Anna, I know that you spend quite a lot of time talking to NHS England, NHS Scotland, etc., and Wales colleagues, because what Jason's just outlined is quite a transformation about how the NHS in general and the community will view the ambulance service, because you need all of those 3 things to go hand in hand. Anna, what do you think? There's a willingness across the NHS to actually adopt this? Do they understand the points that Jason are making in the way that perhaps you and Jason do?
So I think AACE published a vision for the ambulance sector earlier this year with NHS providers and NHS Confederation, and that's available for listeners on our website, that really kind of articulates that direction of travel. And I mentioned earlier, fully appreciating that this is only relevant to our kind of English members, but has a kind of bearing across the kind of wider membership base. With regard to the 10-year plan, that's sort of the second part of the Darcy review with the new Labour government, our kind of intent is to kind of really make the case for this kind of direction of travel and this transformation within ambulance services, which would much better meet the needs of patients, very much fit with Wes Streeting's kind of agenda away from kind of prevention rather than ill health, moving away from the hospital, so treating people in the community. So we're kind of on this journey, and people are aware of that. We need to get better at, as Jason just said, at articulating that, and we have done that in our vision, but building on that and making the flipping things a bit. So rather than kind of focusing on the symptoms of the current situation, the handover delays that we're experiencing, and that have a phenomenal impact upon our people, upon our patients, looking at what the offer we can make as a system to the rest of health and social care, to ensure that we are getting people the care they need in the right place at the right time. And so that, and at the heart of this, which I think is really, really important to sort of articulate, is so we can ensure that people that need an emergency ambulance get an emergency ambulance in a timely way. So it's going right back to the heart of that kind of core ambulance service provision, and about protecting that, because currently it isn't working, and we're not protecting that as well as we should be for those people, and it could be any of us that need an ambulance within 6, 8, 10 minutes. That's not happening in a way that is acceptable currently. So it's very significant, but the case is so compelling. And again, as Jason's referenced, for our people, for our patients, and for our kind of the wider health and social care piece, that is very difficult to kind of for anybody to push back against it, kind of when you engage with it and sort of see the difference it has the potential to make. And it is very much, again from what Jason said, it's kind of bringing things sort of up to speed, making sure things are fit for purpose in the world that we're kind of living in today, and will be living in this sort of coming decade and beyond.
It's again really, really quite fascinating, because it sounds like there's a lot of ideas, and I think, Anna, what you said there was really important around, it's hard to argue against it when the purpose is to enable the services to do what we all want them to do, which is to get to us very quickly when we really do need that. But also, always in life, there are obstacles to moving forward in a logical, sensible path. So both for you, Anna, and for Jason, do you see any obstacles that you're going to need to work really hard to actually get over, or go through in the coming years?
So Anna, do you want to jump in?
So first of all, a massive one, and this is kind of what senior leadership is about, is managing the here and now. And I reference handover delays, how difficult things are currently for patients, for our people, and operating in the world as it is now, as we're in November now, we're seeing kind of pressures increasing, whilst also having an eye on that future and what is possible. So I think a massive challenge for ambulance services in the financial climate that they find themselves in now, which is more difficult and challenging than ever before, would be my reflection. Managing to do the best as things are now, whilst also having an eye on that transformation and the future too, but whilst not losing sight of either. So that's a massive one for me. And then the culture challenge. So Jason kind of had that as his first of his 4 kind of points, that would be the top of mine as well. But managing that and making sure we're taking people along with us for the right reasons, and getting to the place whereby everybody in the ambulance sector, employees, volunteers, learners, patients, everybody feels safe. And we know that we're we've got a good plan of work in place. Trusts have at a local level. We've got a great national programme of work, but it's achieving that and continuing to move in that direction while sort of navigating everything that's going on in the kind of clinical provider space. So they're the two big challenges for me, Karl. But I'm very hopeful and optimistic that they can kind of be approached and surmounted, because there's a phenomenal amount of commitment to both of those two, and to keep that momentum going. Great to have Jason as our chair now, who's kind of fully on board there, out in front in many ways with regard to those two sort of challenges that need to kind of be broached and managed. So yeah, that's what I'd say on that one, Karl. Thank you.
Jason?
Yeah, look, I mean, I agree fully with everything that Anna's just said. I think those two things are key. I think that I'd add another one if I could, which is about this is the kind of stakeholder management piece, and by stakeholder I don't just mean politicians and opinion formers in the health system. I also mean patients, the public, the community, and our partner organisations that we work with. So I think there's a job of work for us to do as a sector to educate is perhaps the wrong way to describe this, but raise awareness amongst all those groups and individuals that I've just described about what the art of the possible is in an ambulance service now, because there is a vision that people have of an ambulance service, which is you ring 999, a big yellow truck screeches to a halt outside on blue lights, and off you get whizzed to the emergency department. The model of old. Well, we all know, the colleagues listening to this today, and those working in and around closely with the sector know that is not what we're about anymore. And we've got a much bigger, broader offer for the health and social care system for our people and for our patients. And so there is a job of work for us to do to raise awareness amongst all of those groups and individuals of what we can actually do now. Less transport, more care in communities, more professionalised sector, degree educated, masters educated, prescribing. You say to people, well, I'll send a paramedic round who can write you a prescription. They're like, what? I need to go and see my GP for that. It's like, no, you don't need to see your GP anymore for a prescription. Our people can do that. And so the changing face of healthcare and our role in that, as a provider of care, healthcare, urgent and emergency healthcare, not just emergency care, taking people to emergency departments. So there's a job of work for us, I think, to do, Karl, in raising awareness of what the art of the possible is. So in addition to Anna's two, I'd add that.
Okay, and that of course feeds into your lobbying of key decision makers. When you think that the public are also key decision makers in this, even though they're not the ones that sign the checks and give you the space, we are the people, if I can talk about myself, that have to start behaving slightly differently and understanding what is actually available and on offer to us. That's really fascinating. But there is one point that I want to go back to, because both Jason and Anna, you both put it very close to the top of your obstacles or challenges or priorities, and that's the issue of culture, which is quite timely given the recent news article on Sky TV, which Jason, from my perspective and from AACE's, it was good to see such robust responses to it and actually openness to deal with the issue. So I just thought it would be interesting, rather than to go through what the news bulletins were about and the news articles, but actually to talk about the positive things that are happening. Jason, from your perspective, what you're trying to lead on in your own service and now in your wider role. And Anna, also to talk to you about the work that AACE is doing in this area to try and actually get rid of this obstacle that you both saw as a major priority. So, Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Karl. I mean, look, this is really difficult stuff, and I suppose I start by saying thank you to all of those colleagues that are listening today that have been working in organisations or currently are working in organisations that have come forward to share their experiences with us. where they haven't had the best of experience at work. I recognise that's going to be difficult and very challenging for people to do, but of course, to improve, to learn, to improve, to change the workplace experience, we need to hear that. So firstly, a thank you to people that have come forward and shared their experience. The second one is, I think, to say that the vast majority of our people are doing great stuff every day in really difficult circumstances up and down the country, be they colleagues in contact centres, on the front line, in our corporate support teams, or anywhere else in our organisations. So the vast majority of people are doing the right thing. And providing great care and supporting their colleagues at work. What we've got are pockets of poor behaviour. In some cases, and certainly some of the experiences, the examples that I've heard, not only from my own organisation here, but I've heard from colleagues across the country. It is beggars belief, Carl. I just cannot believe how people would ever think some of the behaviour that has taken place in our professional workplaces was okay. It wouldn't have been okay 30 years ago, let alone now. And so in those small numbers of cases where we've got really, really poor behaviour, we do have to act swiftly, firmly, decisively. Because there is no place for that kind of behaviour in our organisations. That said, we've also got to play the long game, and your colleagues would have heard me perhaps use that phrase in the Sky stuff recently. And by that, what I mean is that the long game is about managing and tackling the less obvious inappropriate behaviour in the workplace. So this is the banter, this is defacing posters, this is sexualized comments in the workplace, inappropriate touching, incivility. It's all of that kind of stuff, which goes to create an unpleasant experience and environment for our people. I think that's much harder to deal with actually than the obvious and extreme cases of really bad behaviour, because there's processes, systems and processes we've got in place to deal with that. So, this is difficult stuff. The recent media coverage, I said this to my colleagues, my chief exec colleagues, that was probably the most difficult interview I've ever done, because it was tackling something deeply uncomfortable in our organisations and in our sector across the UK, where our own people and patients too, in some cases, have been exposed to things which should just never be happening. And so we've got a job of work to do as leaders, not just people like me, where we've got leadership in our title or in our role, but all of us, every single one of us in our organisations across the country has a leadership role to play in this, because we have to get to a point where all of our workplaces are safe, inclusive, respectful workplaces where we tolerate and we value difference, and that all of our people are safe coming to work. Now, I've kind of drifted around a bit there, and Anna may probably want to add to that. But this is important stuff. It's going to be difficult. It's a journey. It's going to take time. We have to recognise that the vast majority of our people are doing great stuff and are doing the right thing every single day. But that also doesn't mean that we don't have to put a lot of focus and effort into improving where we've got pockets of poor behaviour or issues we need to tackle. Anna.
Yeah, so all that I'd add to that, completely echo everything you've said, Jason, but just building on one particular point, the bit around, so there is something about those, the kind of most extreme instances and dealing with those in an appropriate way with the police when necessary, but that kind of low level poor behaviours is absolutely key to, we know the research to show this, absolutely key and fundamental to changing kind of workplace culture and seeing that kind of continuum. So where people can get away with low level kind of sexually inappropriate behaviour, then that kind of, it builds those individuals' sort of confidence and ability to kind of do things that are worse, essentially. And we know that where that's tolerated, where there's a culture where that's tolerated, that gives a kind of breeding ground to people that want to go on and do worse things, essentially. And so it's kind of really underlining that point, that it's absolutely imperative to be operating at that level. And to echo Jason's point, everybody has kind of got a role to play in this. And I think the imperative within any workplace is so compelling, but in the context of the ambulance service, where we're there to care for people with the kind of added kind of patient side of things, it's so kind of undisputable that we're there to do our best for patients. Therefore, we should be sort of treating people that are working alongside us with respect too. So it's top priority for AACE. It kind of ends up being the cultural piece, the sexual safety piece. We spend a lot of time talking about this within the AACE team, within the CEO group. We've got a brilliant reducing misogyny and improving sexual safety lead who spent time with all the boards at a national level. We've got a community of practice, so people that have kind of experienced these unwanted behaviours. So we've got a really kind of comprehensive programme at a national level that's kind of replicated within trusts, but can't emphasise enough how important it is that everybody kind of steps into this space, so we can make sure that, given it's the ambulance service, that it is a sort of safe space for all our people and our patients alike. Karl, can I just come back in on another point with regards to your last one, if I'm able to do that? Completely agree with Jason's point around raising awareness within our stakeholder group of what we can do as a sector. I think where you sort of came back in around people better understanding what the ambulance service can do, I feel very strongly that it's not for patients to kind of work out where they need to go. And this is why at AACE we would have lobbied and would continue to lobby, appreciating this isn't always the case, but for ambulance services, 999 services, to be sort of co-delivered alongside 111 services, so that there's kind of one front door. And the onus emphasis shouldn't be on the patient to determine whether they need to ring the urgent care centre, go to the same day emergency care unit, go to ED, go to the outside kind of core GP operating hours. They would kind of come through 111, 999, and then get navigated to the place that they will get the sort of most appropriate care for them, and will ensure that they're not putting too great a burden on other parts of the health and social care system, if that makes sense. So I think a big bit of our offer is around that kind of navigation piece as well to other parts of health and social care. So just a slight sort of nuanced response to your point in that one, if that makes sense.
It doesn't, and I totally agree with that, because one of the things that we believe in strongly at TASC is our initial contact team do exactly what you're describing.
Yeah.
They listen to the people, they make an assessment with the individual about what support they need, and then they help them with their decisions as to where they go. So I think that's really, really the right way to approach it. That's the important bit. On the issue of culture and the issues we've talked about, just to say that we at TASC stand with you. We were part of the working group that produced the consensus statement. And as you know, Anna, Jason, you may be aware, we're working with people with lived experience of the issues to design a support offer, which we'll hopefully launch in January, which I think is a big step forward. The interesting thing that you both talked about is this word compassion, which in a caring profession, to actually have some of the behaviours that Jason talked about having to listen to, that we hear with the people come to us, I think getting that compassion back into the service is hugely key, and putting it front and centre. And it occurred to me whilst you were both talking that one thing that someone once said to me in a different context around cultural change and improving behaviours, this is about making sure that everybody feels empowered to challenge, to speak up. And I've tried to live with it in my own sort of life, that the behaviour that you walk past is the behaviour that you condone. And I think that is always been really important, I think to me. We've taken up our time. It's been, I think, quite a wide-ranging conversation. I have definitely learnt a great deal, which is really useful for me. And hopefully the people listening to this podcast will equally have learnt things, but also, I think, been stimulated for what they can do to drive cultural change and improve the workplace environment, but actually be quite excited about what the ambulance service of the future can be. Because, as you say, the vast majority of people that work within the NHS services would agree with everything that you said about culture, behaviours, and I think increasingly agree with the vision that you've both been putting forward for what it could look like. So hopefully that's what people will take away. Any closing words, Anna, Jason?
So thank you for inviting us to be on this podcast. Great to be here with Jason, with our new chair, and just to thank TASC for all your support in the sexual safety space, the culture space, and the employee wellbeing and suicide prevention space. You're a fabulous ally, and thank you for everything that you're doing for the ambulance sector and patients. Thank you.
I'm almost blushing.
Karl, the only thing I would add to everything that Anna has just said is to staff and volunteers in the ambulance sector listening to this podcast today, thank you for everything that you do. You're doing great stuff every single day, up and down the country, left and right, up and down, often, as I said before, in really, really difficult circumstances. And you're providing great care to patients when they are at their most vulnerable and in their most needy point of their life, if you like. That's why they're calling us. So thank you for everything you do.
Thank you both. It's been a pleasure.